Good day, everyone. Live from Cloud City, Seattle. This Just In. I'm Justin, and this is the Microsoft Reactor community show for what is new. And we're at a different time today. Normally, for many of you who watch our show, it is 8 a.m. Pacific time. But we have a special guest that hails from Australia. Welcome, Stefano.
Hey Justin, hi everybody. Thanks for having me. Yes, you're right. 9 a.m. here, so thanks for accommodating the time.
Yeah, no problem. So, I'm pretty sure, Stefano is probably in the middle of the night or very, very late on our normal stream time. So this actually gives us an opportunity to reach our Sydney and our Asia Pacific based audience, Australia and the like as well. So I'm excited to do this new stream time. And hey, if you all chime in on the chat window and things like that, maybe we'll have to move it to this time and such. Speaking of that, we have a code of conduct for our Reactor events. Most importantly, be nice, be respectful, be kind to everyone, but also log into your favorite chat platforms, whether it be Microsoft Learn TV, or Twitch, or YouTube. We're streaming on all three today. Log in and share your perspective on what is going to be a very, very interesting topic, which is what is new in NFTs, cryptocurrency, and blockchain. Very, very interesting topics, certainly in the news lately, and lots of that's going on here as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about the long run, what the promise of the technology is, and what we can do all in the future around that. So just a reminder, these are all our own perspectives on it. And so Stefano's going to share his perspective and mine, invite you to share your own. But we're going to think about it from a long run technology perspective. So with that, Stefano, why don't we get to know you a little bit better as our guest speaker and expert here. So tell me, what inspired you to pursue a career in cryptocurrency, NFTs, and other engineering around these types of tech?
Yeah, look, also to what you mentioned before, we're not here to give any financial advice on investment, right? So it's really a conversation on what's going on in this space, the blockchain, and there's so much more than just cryptocurrency to blockchain. This is what sparked my interest. It was a few years ago, actually, 2016, 2017. At that time, I was in Switzerland and not yet in Australia, where I'm based now. And really in what is called the Crypto Valley is physically a valley between the town of Zurich and Zug, where is the headquarters of Ethereum. And it was such a amazing time for blockchain startups, for evolving and growing in this space. I was there. I wasn't at Microsoft yet at the time. I was with a partner and working very closely also with the incubators in the university. One of very popular university in Zurich is ETH, where even Einstein studied there. And so I was a really sort of a technical advisor, supporting the community there and to create their prototype, their MVPs, their products into different technologies, and in particular blockchain. That sparked me a lot of interest because the decentralization nature of it, the distribution of content and workloads, and then the concept of the smart contract, the possibility to create trust in process using technology without relying on a central authority. So I started using blockchain for diverse use cases, and not for investment in cryptocurrency, as I mentioned. So really about creating an automated and connected supply chain or digital signature, certificate that are issued on a blockchain store and verified there. So all these nice use cases that blockchain can really empower, and got me started. And now this enthusiasm keeps on going, and there is so much that is going on in the market and Microsoft as well.
Very cool. Well, I actually didn't know that you were part of ETH Zurich. I actually had the opportunity to attend, not to attend there permanently, but I went to ETH Zurich and taught a lecture on data science. And so
Wow, very nice.
that was pre-pandemic, back when travel happened occasionally and things like that. But great
Very
school and
nice, very nice.
great opportunity to be part of that. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more, I think, today about non-financial forms of NFTs and blockchain. And that's one of the things that really drew me to selecting this topic today for the show, is that there's just some fascinating use cases on what we can do beyond cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
although that's pretty cool and pretty interesting, well in its own right and such. So before we get into that, Stefano, maybe let's talk a little bit more conceptually about blockchain, NFTs, crypto. How do all these technologies work? So can you give us your definition or your perspective for how you think about, let's begin with blockchain as the functional technology, smart contract?
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, we are all familiar, no, with the traditional model of making any kind of transaction. Let's keep it simple for everybody's sake. Financial transaction. I have to make a payment. This payment is online payment, digital payment. This payment is traditionally processed through some payment gateway. It can be your credit card or online payment gateway, whatever intermediary is in the middle between the two parties exchanging value that has to authorize this transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, with this model, we know how it works. So there may be fees to be paid for the transaction to happen, but also relying on one single entity, now that is in the middle of this conversation, create what is typically called, especially in IT, a single point of failure. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, if we use a credit card or bank for a bank system for any transfer of value, we're not relying on one single server. Now that if it crashes, is not available. Obviously, there is a redundancy of services and infrastructure in there for high availability, but it's still one single entity, one single intermediary. If compromised, the entire chain of value can be tampered with. Hence, several years ago, an entity called Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know if it is a person, a group of people, what is their background, came up with the concept of Bitcoin. Blockchain was already there as a technology, but Bitcoin is really the application of the blockchain technology, so a decentralized and distributed immutable ledger to process financial transaction. His initial idea was to create a replacement of the traditional government centralized currency with a form of payment where transactions are processed and verified in a peer-to-peer, completely decentralized network without any single authority. And this is how blockchain evolved. Obviously, Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies took different directions, not too much a form of currency for day-to-day payment, but more of a form of investment or acquiring value. But that's another story. But all these technologies put together then ended up in what we see today as DeFi, decentralized finance, NFT, the non-fungible tokens, and obviously cryptocurrency and all the other use cases. We'll touch a few of them in the course of today's webinar. NFTs are fascinating. And NFT is a relatively new acronyms, NFT, non-fungible token, but is one of the foundation of the blockchain technology from the beginning. In some way, I can say, when as I mentioned, in 2017, I started working on verifiable credentials like your diploma, your certificate of completion of study, your driving license, to be signed and that signature stored on an immutable ledger on a blockchain. That is a form of an NFT, something unique that belongs only to you and cannot be exchanged for anything of the same value, like a banknote, that you can exchange and you can swap it and it's still the same value. NFT is unique. The same foundation, the same technology, but the opportunity is much more than what we see today, which is a collection of artwork. It's really the possibility to tokenize all entire digital asset, from real estate to, yes, artworks and any other memorable moments or asset that we want to store.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that when I was first looking at this, that I finally had this sort of aha moment. For me, it wasn't necessarily cryptocurrency, although I kind of understand the value of this, the decentralized, that element. For me, it was the idea that I'm a gamer and I love marketplaces that are full of value. And to me, it is truly, truly interesting that people could express themselves in a digital world through their character or their choice of clothing or that really great sword, or it's the different elements that make gaming really interesting in a marketplace. And so for those of us out there in the community and stuff, can you kind of describe, like, how do you make that jump from, what's happening in a game where you have these sort of digital elements of value, like you said, artwork is part of it, or a credential. How do you make that jump to what we are now talking about in the industry as a non-fungible token?
Look, I find the application of this technology very inclusive. There is so much talking now about Web3, as a sort of a evolution. It's not a version number, but it's more of a evolution of what the web, the World Wide Web is. When it started over 30 years ago, right? With the traditional stack of HTML, where content was really static, like, one way from the producer to the content, and then the more interactive feed, the social networks, sort of Web 2. And now Web 3 is the decentralization of all the resources, where even our identities don't belong to organizations, but we own our own identities and we decide how we want to use them, and what kind of information we want to disclose. So I find it more inclusive. And to come back to your question, how we jump into this, Web3 is probably going to be the keyword for what is going to happen, and is already happening in blockchain. I like to talk more of Web3 rather than blockchain on crypto, because it's sort of a bigger umbrella where we can put together different technologies. And say, as a digital artist, in the past, I had to rely on centralized applications that or services where I can publish my artwork and then offer this as a marketplace, where obviously there are some fees to be paid, and there is a barrier of entry, the difficulty of being discovered, and the promotion and everything else. In this way, with the Web3, with the decentralization part of it, I'm in control of all the process, and I decide how this is going to happen. I'll mention one very quick example. A few months ago, I was supporting a charity organization initiative here in Australia for indigenous artists of the Aboriginal community of Australia. The activity, this initiative is called Walking Between Worlds, because all the different worlds of this indigenous community come together and they produce their amazing artwork, which is extremely colorful, and then they publish as an NFT on Web3, on the system that allow. I don't like to call it investors, but more of people that invest in art rather than from a financial perspective, would like to buy this NFT, this artwork, and then obviously the profit goes to the artist and to the charity in question. Now, why I'm mentioning this? Well, first of all, this is a technology that is incredibly inclusive. indigenous artists that are absolutely not familiar with technology were brought into this production pipeline of artwork in a very user-friendly way. But also, and more important, they were able to publish their content without signing any contract with any organization, without understanding how to create an account on don't want to make any names, but no, marketplace, bid services, auction services online. Everything was really as smooth as connecting to your laptop and uploading your artwork into a system that we have prepared as part of the solution that did all the job for them in a very natural way. Still, Web3 has some areas that of improvement, from a user experience perspective, but I can see the value of making this experience much better and more inclusive, more approachable. That it would be a bit silly to neglect this transformation that is happening.
Yeah, it shows just incredible promise. And Carlos out there on Twitch, kudos for asking the question just as we were about to go to Web3. So I believe the answer is a yes there. I think it's an inclusive part as well. Stefano, Nathan from New Zealand asked great questions. By the way, hi Nathan, thanks for being out in New Zealand. I hope this stream time is good for you. Thanks for making it as well. So like Nathan asked a really interesting question about is there resilience and capacity in the NFT space for transactions, given what we saw in art with Bored Ape, and you'll probably have to define what Bored Ape is for our community out there as well. But how are we thinking about resilience and capacity in this space if this were to grow up and really become at a much higher scale than it is now?
Yeah, look, this is true. Bored Ape is a collection of artwork in the shape of apes with different colors, different backgrounds, different attractive shapes and colors that make it as a form of investment in some way because they are unique pieces of art. What is unique is that some components are more rare than the other ones, which is what happened also with the Aboriginal collection that I mentioned before. In theory, by using technology, you can really produce an uncountable number of images to publish. But what makes these images a bit more special than others is the rarity of some components that are used, like colors or shapes. A bit like your collection of stamps was a bit unique because you had a stamp that no one else had, or it was a bit more rare than the other ones. And that's where the value comes from. But then there is a lot of working on the moment that NFT is generating. So some collections may be more successful than others, and it's not because they are less good from a technical perspective, or less beautiful, from an artwork perspective. There is a lot of marketing communication up there, and one of the way that I suggested to jump into this, even if you're a developer, even if your focus is purely on coding, the coding is not challenging. It's not more difficult than the traditional Web2 stack, just slightly different. But what is really important, in my opinion, and I suggest not just to marketers, but also to the developer community, to jump into community engagement, create visibility of your work or the work that you are producing or collaborating with, because the special part, the special component of this NFTs community and in general blockchain is the community engagement. I love this aspect because in some way, coincidentally, or maybe not, it happened during the lockdown period that we have experienced in the last couple of years, where people have been forced to isolate, to work remotely, and then the communities have expanded, not just me based here in Australia, meeting with my mates for a community in the evening, and we are 50 or 100 of us all in the same room, which used to happen. But now we are 2,000, we are 20,000 all around the world, talking and communicating and sharing value. This, coincidentally or no, it happened now and has created these communities that are sharing value. Artwork in this moment, but the potential for value generated by NFT is much larger, much bigger than that.
Yeah, yeah. To some degree, this Microsoft Reactor community that this stream is part of experience the same. We used to be all these different physical locations around the world in 13 locations, and we went online on Twitch and YouTube and where we are now. And as a result, we've seen a much more inclusive community of people who are able just to kind of experience some of the things we used to do in the Sydney Reactor or the Redmond Reactor or the San Francisco Reactor, which is super cool. Well, you started talking about community, and so Nick on Learn TV also asks, I am a software developer and I'd like to contribute to Web 3.0 projects. Where do you recommend to jump into these kind of projects and start coding?
There is so much need for talent in Web3 at the moment because the tech is a shift, right? So we used to build HTML, CSS, JavaScript, starting with the foundation of jQuery, but going to know the more recent framework with React and the like. And this is a space where there is plenty of talents that we can find. And now there is a little bit of a gap in using Web3.js, for example, to connect your wallet. There is a gap in writing smart contracts, and there is the opportunity, to experience a different way of using the web technology, the web stack for this decentralized and distributed pattern. So the patterns are slightly different. The technology at the end is the same, is HTTPS and the like, right? So this is represent an opportunity for the developer community to contribute and specialize. One is join a community, find a project that is particularly inspiring, and give your contribution, which is backend, blockchain, smart contract, front end, connect the wallet and do the minting of the NFTs, or on the digital creative aspect of it, generate artwork or anything that can be tokenized. Obviously, not just devs, right? So there is an opportunity for community engagement, for marketing and promotion. And just keep only one thing in mind. We're not doing for the money. No, we're doing for the community, for the engagement. And this is what drives me personally. I don't try to seek opportunity for pure financial investment. I try to seek opportunities for social impact.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, since you asked the skilling question and other things like that, I felt like I'd show some of our resources that we also have if you are a beginner or a software engineer that's looking to get more involved in wealth. Normally I show this at the end of the presentation, but I'll come back to this a little later. We've got some great demos, some more great things to talk about too. But if you are curious, we got a video series of blockchain for beginners. Stefano's going to talk about Azure confidential computing here shortly. And so we do have a platform. We Microsoft do build tools for people who are looking to build with these types of technologies and things like that. But it is about the community. And this is an area that's relatively has so much area to be defined yet. And so I think the role that Microsoft plays is in being a platform and being a place where developers can work together on the technologies and things like that. But be sure to take a look at some of those resources if that's helpful for you as well. Well, Stefano, I want to kind of bridge back to a little bit more of NFTs itself. So we talked a little about some different forms that are non-financial, like artwork and such. What are some other use cases that you really like out there that you think are really going to move the mark in the next few years?
Well, one that I'm particularly keen is all the aspect of decentralize the ownership of your digital identity. Now, think for a moment. We are all connected to systems like Microsoft Teams or StreamYard in this case, or any other application, social networks, and we use an account, so our credentials, our personal data that is stored in some database somewhere owned by that specific organization. So we rely on this organization to provide the best identity service possible. No, so in terms of the performance, but also in terms of the security, the data privacy, our data is not used for any other purposes. And unfortunately, we hear from time to time where identities or credit card numbers are compromised, passwords are leaked, and so on. This is not this is a challenge per se with any centralized system. The concept of the DID, the decentralized identity, is to put the ownership of identities and verifiable credentials in the hands of users, of people, where I can build my own wallet, so to speak, of folders with all my credentials, and then disclose them to the authorities that need access only for the information that is necessary to do so. For example, if I have to prove age to buy something only for 18 plus, so often I need to provide a credit card or driving license as a proof of age. But a driving license or a credit card contain much more pieces of information than just my date of birth. So why I'm disclosing more information than necessary? How the recipient of this information is going to store it securely, reassuring that it's not going to be leaked, and how they're going to use it. Are they going to sell it to someone else? And we know that happened in the past, right? So DID introduced this, I am the owner. It's not about replacing the authorities. It's not about saying I don't need government, I don't need universities, I don't need the police. No, we all need authorities to issue the certificate. But the role of these authorities, the government, etc., is not to store this information, but is to issue and verify. So how about we rely on identity hubs, which are decentralized, are extremely secure and confidential? And this is my hook also to confidential computing, which we're going to talk in a moment. Why not protecting this data in identity hubs, completely decentralized, and then transact our the exchange on an immutable ledger to create a global audit trail of all these transactions? And this is where confidential computing comes in at support of this technology, providing a decentralized ledger, a blockchain network, where I can create identity hubs on one side, which collect all these pieces of identities, but without a risk of being compromised, simply because, they are decentralized. The nature of they are distributed, I should say. So the nature of distribution is that you can't just take over all the system at once. If you want to do that, you will need to hack all the different nodes. Well, it's much more complex than only one single centralized network, right? And also, the nature of confidential computing is that it provides hardware encryption of your workloads, data, and applications. This is the only technology that can provide this level of security, creating trusted execution environments where your data is being processed and protected with hardware encryption when it is in memory. So you get the normal encryption at rest in your data storage, your database, your file system. You get the normal protection over HTTPS, so the communication channel when data is in transit is protected, but also when data is in memory, when it's being processed, and that prevent access even from the cloud provider. So the question now that I may be asking is, you're talking about these identity hubs, but physically, where are they stored? Cloud providers all around the world. How can we trust the cloud providers? You can, because now the root of trust is in the hardware. Encryption at CPU level, the cloud provider will not have access to your data in these identity hubs. This is the power of what at Microsoft call the confidential computing framework, or CCF, is the ability to create a decentralized network with blockchain computing capability, which also run inside a trusted execution environment. So a hardware protected memory space.
Very cool. And so the confidential consortium framework, my understanding, this is a standard, right? This is not something that just Microsoft came up with. This is part of the community. Do I understand that correctly, right?
It's all open source, absolutely correct. And there is a Linux Foundation consortium that is creating the guidelines, the patterns for confidential computing. Super simple. Confidentialcomputing.io is a Linux Foundation. Microsoft is one of the members, but there are so many. Just go on it, you will find a lot of other participants in organizations like Intel, Google, Facebook, and a lot of others that are part of this consortium. Is the interest of the community, and all the frameworks that are produced as part of this consortium are open source. So it's really community, is really for the community's sake.
Yeah,
it's
no,
not
it's really interesting, because in the sense that this is based on open standards and open source, and similar to many other workloads that work on Microsoft's cloud, Azure, including other cloud providers as well, you can deploy these to the cloud, and then there are certain benefits that come with deployment to the clouds, and that's where kind of confidential computing comes in, and that. Stefano, do you want, tell us a little bit more about, like, how does Azure fit into it? So if I'm a software engineer, I'm kind of looking to get involved in this space. How do I go from the framework and understanding these conceptually to then deploying on the cloud and things as well?
Yeah, look, the first action I will take is try to to get a bit more familiar with the technology, and this is not anything more special than the normal infrastructure that we are already familiar. At the end of the day, we are talking of virtual machines, Kubernetes containers, SQL database. So infrastructure and platform as a service also manage instances running completely in Azure. What's the difference though? The hardware that they are power is based on this special extension to the CPUs that make for the memory encryption, that make for this confidential computing. But the experience, as a developer, as a cloud administrator, as a solution architect, is pretty much the same. If you know how to use a Kubernetes cluster, you know how to work also with a confidential container. If you know how to use a SQL server database, you will know also how to use a confidential SQL database. Obviously, just have to keep in mind the confidentiality applies to the end-to-end solution. So that there are no weak points where you say, okay, I'm going to put my database confidential, but then I forget to the rest of the application. Then you open up to some holes in your solution. But overall, the technology at the foundation of confidential computing is the traditional stack that we are familiar with. How to get started? From Azure, from our docs, and from webinars and workshops like this, and also I suggest to register for Build, which is the Microsoft event for the developer community in a couple of weeks. It's completely free, fully inclusive. You access from the comfort of your home, wherever you're based, and you can attend plenty of content on this amazing technology.
Cool. Well, Stefano, would you like to kind of show this in action? I think you and I talked about that you've got a demo here that you're going to speak to a little bit on it. Is this a good time to kind of show how you would then use this as well?
They would be perfect, yes. And look, one of the typical use cases. Do you mind going one slide back so I can just
Yeah,
show
of course.
the high-level architecture diagram?
Yeah.
This is basically enabling multi-party computing or workloads. Think for a moment. We have different institutes. It can be healthcare, it can be banks, it can be anywhere. We want to share data, but in a confidential way. So making sure that organization 1 cannot access 2 and 3, and the other way around. But also, and more importantly, that this aggregation of data that exists in a central computing infrastructure solution is not accessed by the cloud provider itself. So by using confidential computing, in the example that I'm going to show in a moment, 2 hospitals are sharing their medical records for their patient. So you understand this is extremely confidential data. And the way they do it is leveraging a trusted execution environment where all this information is then processed by a machine learning application. This application, this code, this machine learning code, is the only one authorized to access this data. And why is that? Because it runs in this TEE, Trusted Execution Environment, which is completely isolated, completely protected, and the memory is encrypted. So meaning that not even the cloud provider can access what is inside this, let me call it a black box in some way, because it's completely protected from the outside. And as you understand, the machine learning will benefit of increased data. So then the power will be now in increased accuracy of prediction. So what we are seeing now basically is 2 systems. Start from the first one, Hospital A, where I have a data set for patient data. So I'm going to encrypt this data and then share it with the trusted execution environment. So this will produce a file that is encrypted. I sign in with a user A just to simulate that I'm on the same system but with account A. And as you see in a moment, this user has not uploaded the system. There are 0 files just yet. So I'm going to upload this file just now. And this file will be processed by machine learning. Now, the beauty of it that now here I'm interacting, simulating the user experience. But obviously, we can automate the entire process. Now I switch to another virtual desktop just to simulate that I'm on another user B, which is going to do exactly the same, but for their own data set. So it's a completely different data set with medical records from their own patient. They're going to do the same. So I sign in into the same application, but as user B. Now, in this case, I can see that user A has already uploaded their file. I'm going to do the same for user B. So now the 2 hospitals are working in complete isolation, but sharing data inside this trusted execution environment. What happens? It happens that now I train the model, so a typical process of machine learning, to make the prediction happen. And when I download the model and I use this model for my scoring, for my machine learning prediction, I get an accuracy which is okay, but not fantastic. So you get the scoring, which is happening in a moment, is doing the evaluation, which is about 84% of accuracy. It's a good number, but we're talking about medical records here. We definitely need more than that. So by combining the two data sets, the accuracy of prediction can really bump up to even 97%, which obviously gives me a lot more confidence than 84. And this was possible because not only I aggregated the different data sources, but I made this aggregation in a trusted execution environment where none of the parties involved can access each other dataset, including the cloud provider.
Very cool. Very interesting. Yeah, and I think what's interesting, I know for those of you who watched last week's episode, we talked about healthcare, in fact, and talked about the Microsoft Cloud for healthcare and the new APIs and set of services that we launched there. To some degree, this in part is the practice of being able to share data confidentially, and then be able to overall, especially when you think about machine learning models and things like that, the interoperability of data can really make a huge difference here.
Yeah, and Justin, just now to come back also to the question you asked before, what are the other use cases for NFT? I mentioned the digital identity, and obviously, the output of a machine learning with this confidential computing at the power of it can be a credential. A medical record is a unique record that can be tokenized and be an NFT. An NFT is not just an image, right? It's anything that is unique, non-fungible, that you cannot exchange. You and I don't want to exchange our medical records, not just for privacy, but because it just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah,
yours totally. Is yours, mine is mine. So this is the value of NFT. But not only that, the CCF, the Confidential Computing Framework, is also a ledger capability, so an immutable ledger, which provides the ability to store transactions containing confidential data in an immutable way. We use this technology or even in the case of this machine learning inside a trusted execution environment, to capture anomalies. A verification process can identify if anomalies have happened into the scoring process, and if so, these anomalies are raised a sort of out of compliance or an alert which contains confidential data. So you don't want to send it around with emails as attachment, right? It will be a breach of confidentiality. So you store this information in a confidential ledger along with the confidential information that has generated the anomaly, and you keep an immutable trace of everything that happened. This is the synergy of confidential computing, multi-party machine learning, and the use of blockchain, NFTs for applications beyond artwork, beyond cryptocurrency.
Yeah. I like Carlos on Twitch. He makes the comment, I think blockchain's strength seems to be in cybersecurity, not in the economy. I won't pass judgment on the economy. I don't want to make a value judgment here or there. I think there's great promise there as well. But what I will say, I think certainly learning from you, Stefano, is the opportunity in cybersecurity is huge and is really foremost inclusive and transparent and decentralized and all of these key themes that you're talking about. As well. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges inherent in this space. Where do you think this industry and this technology needs to go in the coming 5 years to really reach its full potential?
Yeah, so it's a 5-year prediction is a challenge for any technology, right? But specifically in blockchain, where we see changes really every year, every month, I would say, because just the nature of the maturity of the technology is still in its infancy. That is really hard not to consider it stable, mainstream, and ready to make prediction that can be actually met with a good level of anticipation and consistency. No one would expect this. I don't want to use the word bubble in a negative way. It's bubble in a sense that is expanding of the NFT. it is definitely a good thing. So take bubble in this case as an expression of expansion of interest. But
Yeah.
at some point, this NFT has to stabilize into something that is more sustainable. I believe that we can't keep on buying NFTs for $6 million, right? Sooner or later, we're going to finish the money. So it has to become something that is more sustainable, from an economy perspective. So where is all this going? I see a big impact on gaming, for example. You mentioned that you are a gamer, right? Yes. How about creating tokens that are NFTs that are unique for your gaming experience to build your character, your avatar, and also for the compensation, for the reward? Two use cases. One is fan tokens. We all love to engage with sport artists, sport teams, and be part of this community and contribute more than just buying, the jersey or the cap of my soccer team or my baseball team, right? So how about having access to the behind the hood or more intimate connection in a good way with the players and having dinner and these sort of things. This is what the potential of fan tokens enable. The token economy is really connecting people to the content producer. And the other use case is the metaverse at the end. There is so much talking about it. So how about creating an alter ego, a virtual avatar, where rather than spending our fiat currency, we actually spend tokens, credits, and we build a reality that is alternate, but is also projection of our real potential. Again, it's all about making the experience more inclusive. People that have less possibility in the, let me say, real world, here in the metaverse, they will have a different experience.
Yeah, I agree. And for those of you out there, we did have a great This Just In episode on mixed reality and the metaverse. If you want to catch that one with Thomas Lewis and April as well. It was a good one. And I've learned so much about the metaverse since then, beyond the hype cycle and the buzzword of it. Like, I think you're right, Stefano, in a sense that, NFT and metaverse seem to be some of the two of the hottest buzzwords in the tech industry right now. And so I think there's a little bit of time and a little bit of proving out of the technology that needs to take place in order for us as a community to kind of arrive at what becomes the long-term stable things that we use in it. But like one of the scenarios that I get really excited about is the idea of non-financial forms of value exchange, like volunteerism. So in many cases, more and more people are finding a lot of happiness and fulfillment in volunteering for nonprofit organizations and things like that. And one of the interesting ideas I heard is that, nonprofits can now issue NFTs it's basically like a credential. It's like a badge or something that you have earned, that those hours that you volunteered for a really good cause. And it's something you can be part of, whether it be your resume or part of that, that you showcase your passion and your commitment and your ideas of where you love to spend your time too.
Exactly. And because these are unique, they are some badges that, you're right, you can add to your LinkedIn profile, you can add it to your resume, but don't neglect the impact that this may have in 10 years, in 20 years from now. When I was a kid, I was collecting stamps. In that moment, those stamps were a few euros of value. Now probably they're much more, right? I'm not gonna sell them. there is affection to it, right? But still there is a value in there. This is the power of collection, and this is the power of NFT. We see ridiculous money being invested today, but we shouldn't laugh. There is a value in what's happening in 10 years, in 20 years from now, that we may not know just yet, and we may find out being really surprising.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've got about 5 or 10 more minutes left of the stream. Let's talk a little bit more about the skilling and, if you want to have a career in this space, where do you go next, Stefano? So let me just begin. Maybe a
Yeah.
little bit of a fun question there, but what are, if you've got a little bit of spending money and a little bit of extra time, first of all, and you just want to try out this space, what do you recommend to go and tinker with or experiment and such?
Now, look, this can be a little bit biased by my experience, right? Some people may say, hey, go and practice with DeFi, invest your money, differentiate, and do some staking or some investment of your cryptocurrency. And that's absolutely, one way of making the experience with cryptocurrency. The best way is always practice, but in any kind of investment, there is a component of risk. So make sure that you don't invest more than what you are ready to lose. But my background is different, right? As I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't start blockchain with crypto in mind, and still today, although I follow what happens in the DeFi space, my interest is more, let me use a big word, more on the enterprise side, okay? Just the nature of the work that I do. So more looking to blockchain for business, but also blockchain for good. So the application of blockchain technology for charitable purposes. So one of the recommendations that I will say is check what some of the key players in these industries are doing, and allow me to mention Consensus, because they are a Microsoft partner and they're really one of the leaders in the market. Well, first of all, because their wallet MetaMask is one of the most popular, and is a wallet where you can obviously store crypto, but can do much more than that, right? So it really is your gateway to NFTs, to tokens in general, to cryptocurrency, and the blockchain token economy. With economy here, I don't mention only from a financial perspective, but not the larger opportunity that we discussed. So Consensus has different platforms, starting from MetaMask, the wallet, Infura for building your blockchain smart contract, the Truffle suite for all the aspect of DevOps and coding and publishing and testing, and the Quorum blockchain service, which is the evolution of the Azure blockchain service. Some of our audience today may be familiar with Microsoft offering an Azure blockchain service, which was retired last year in favor of the Consensus QBS, Quorum blockchain service, which was the opportunity for Microsoft and Consensus to scale and improve the offering, so making the offering for enterprise blockchain more robust and rather than relying on a generic blockchain in Azure. So my suggestion is get specialized, identify your use case, work with some of these technologies, and do practice. The best way is always to put your hands on the technology and get familiar.
And you mentioned, we talked about Web3 earlier in the stream as well. Precursor skills. What are, if you're really a student or an absolute beginner, do you start with web development, or are there other skills that you would recommend en route to learning blockchain and smart contracts and such?
But yeah, look, at the end, the experience from a user perspective goes through the web or mobile app. So you still want to be familiar with the nature of the technology of the web, the disconnected, stateless HTTP. You want to be familiar with mobile apps interact with a server using REST APIs. And this is the traditional, let me say, Web 2 pattern or stack. As we move into Web 3, Some of the frameworks change, some of the patterns change, but the underlying technology that is enabling all the communication is still strongly based on the HTTP protocol.
Yeah, yeah.
So you still want to be there as a new bias completely out of uni, as you mentioned, or someone that is changing career that has never done web development. Yes, do pick the foundation first, and then get into the Web3 frameworks that can enable this communication with blockchain services.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Stefano, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I learned a lot, especially on the the non-financial forms of confidential computing, blockchain. I really enjoyed kind of learning from you and learning about this topic, because my previous experience was largely Bitcoin and Ethereum and other forms of financial exchange. So those are great areas for all of you out there. Continue to explore as you see fit, the technologies underlying these and things like that. But there are so much more you can do, and even furthermore, there's a much broader world of confidential computing out there that is really more about cybersecurity and about creating trust and creating value through that trust as well. So yeah, any parting thoughts or advice you have for our learners out there, Stefano, as they're looking to get started in this space?
So definitely get started with blockchain development on Microsoft Learn. There is a good starting guide out there. Read out on confidential computing. Absolutely. Confidential computing enables some workloads for making your transaction more protected. So it's definitely a good way to get started. And in general, coming back to what you and I discussed before, join some community. Don't do it on your own. Don't be by yourself. We are in a very connected world, and it would be silly to think that we can build everything by ourselves, or we can learn everything by ourselves. We need to be part of a community and leverage the power of the community, the knowledge of the community, to make it more successful.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the reasons why we have the Microsoft Reactor community here too,
Exactly.
is that this can be a place to learn and a place to ask your questions and to skill up. In addition to great communities out there specifically focusing on blockchain and all of the technologies here. So thank you again, all of you out there. I'm glad we were able again to make this time work for all you people that are out there in Australia, New Zealand, and Asia Pacific as well. If you want to catch up on the series, we have a GitHub repo with all the links for it. It's aka.ms/thisjustin. And so again, thank you all. Have a great day. Learn TV is up at the top of the hour, so I'm going to leave the slide up here for the last 3 minutes. Join us on the next program as well. Thanks again, Stefano.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.